Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. We are here to do the people's business. March 2nd, 2021, full commission meeting. We've got a lot of business in front of us today, and it's certainly a day that we're excited and looking forward to talking and taking care of some things that are real important and moving the city forward. With that, we'll call this meeting to order, and Chair recognizes Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir. At this time, we will have our invocation led by Commissioner Jordan Johnson, after which we'll ask Commissioner Francine Scott to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Would you all join me? We come today thankful and honored to be able to do the people's work. Lord, we ask you to guard our hearts, guard our minds, and guide our hearts and guide our minds as we do the people's business. Help us to keep in mind, Father, that your will is the will that we want to put forward, and help us to do that in a way that is pleasing and acceptable, in a way that brings honor, in a way that brings progress and justice to this community. We love you. We praise your name. And again, we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Let us, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
of the United States of
to the
America,
republic
and to the republic for
which
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice.
liberty, justice for all.
Thank you both for that, Commissioner from the 1st and Commissioner from the 9th. Thank you both for that. I want to take a few minutes to just share a few thoughts today. We most recently have come to the close of February, which is Heart Health Month all across the globe and the nation. It's also a time where we celebrate Black history, the achievements, the accomplishments, the life and the legacy of Black Americans. And as we step into the month of March, we recognize it as Women's History Month. So often we see, hear, appreciate, and respond to the call of women all across this nation, the state, and certainly here in Augusta, Georgia. And so as we celebrate and acknowledge Women's History Month and soon International Women's Day, we put together a short video that we wanted to share with the community and the members of the commission to celebrate women all across this community. At this point, we have a short video that we want to share with you.
From the first settlers who came to our shores, from the first American Indian families who befriended them, men and women have worked together to build this nation. Too often, the women were unsung, and sometimes their contributions went unnoticed. But the achievements, the leadership, the courage, the strength, and the love of women who built America was as vital as that of men, whose names we know so well. March is Women's History Month, and this year's theme is Valiant Women of the Vote. Refusing to be silenced, the theme captures the spirit of these challenging times. Women have refused to sit idly by. Instead, they have united their voices, built coalitions, and changed the narrative of our great country. Here in Augusta, we celebrate Women's History Month and acknowledge the important roles women have played, from suffragists to activists, in changing the landscape of our great country. Join me in thanking the countless unsung heroes who have given birth to the ideas and the movements that have shaken the core of our city, our state, and our nation. Thank you to the women whose shoulders we now stand on for generations to come. Your work is celebrated, and more importantly, we appreciate you.
Again, this is Women's History Month. To the women of the commission, thank you for your leadership and your service. To our clerk of commission, thank you. We celebrate you this entire month. And we're excited about the contributions that you're making and will continue to make. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Back to you, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir. I call your attention to the recognition portion of our agenda. We'd like to offer our congratulations to our February 2021 Years of Service recipients. I think Ms. Rooker is available.
All right. Yes.
I don't see her, Mayor.
Okay, I don't either. All right, we'll come back. All right, we'll come back to Ms. Rooker and our recognition, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Call your attention to the consent portion of our agenda, which consists of items 1 through 19. Items 1 through 19.
Okay.
While we had no objectors during our Public Service Committee meeting, Mr. Mayor, I will call the alcohol petition and ask if there are any objectors in our public space regarding these petitions. Item number 2 is a request for a retail packaged beer and wine license to be used in connection with Discount Foods located at 545 Sandbar Ferry Road. Item number 3 is a request in connection with Gas World located at 2510 Millersville Road, a retail packaged beer and wine license. Item number 4 is a request for a Sunday sales license in connection with Noble Jones located at 15th 8th Street. I'd ask for if Ms. Walton or Ms. McFarley is in the public space, if there are any objectors to either of these alcohol petitions.
Ms. Walton, you're muted.
There are no objectors to
Thank
the
you.
alcohol petitions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our consent agenda consists of items 1 through 19 with no objectors to our alcohol petitions.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. And we have an addendum agenda with 2 items on it. One is an addition to the agenda. Madam Clerk, if you'll read that for the record. Before you do that, is there any objection to the addendum agenda? All right, without objection, these are added to the agenda without objection. All right, Madam Clerk, if you'll read that first one.
Okay. The first one is a motion to approve land lease agreement with Augusta University Health Air Care, LLC, for 61,020 square foot parcel of land north of the Georgia State Patrol hangar.
All right, and revisions to your item, Madam Clerk.
Item number 12. Yes, sir. Our RFP number 28187A, which is our legislative management electronic agenda software, was written. However, did not take into consideration specification requiring the integration of 2 extremely important functions. 1, the electronic online recodification of city codes, and 2, electronic meeting agenda. Such integration and ease of use would be invaluable to Augusta's department and employees, as well as elected officials, Augusta citizens, media, and the public at large. This has become even more needed and valuable in light of conditions arising out of the pandemic and the state of emergency we face. So we would like to revise our motion to read to approve that the RFP item 20187A be canceled by the commission pursuant to Augusta, Georgia's Procurement Code Section 1-10-60, and to allow the clerk of commission to undertake further review and evaluation of needs, timing, and availability of services and improvements relative to the integration of the electronic agenda software and electronic legislative management and agenda software.
Thank you for that, Madam Clerk. Again, without objection. All right. All right, Chair will entertain a motion to add these items to the consent agenda, the addition, the land lease, and with the noted revisions as read into the record by the clerk, and item number 25.
So noted to add to the agenda.
Second.
Is that Mr. Clark and Mr. Franum, or?
Mr. Clark and the Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Are we voting?
Mr. Mayor,
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
are you still taking items for the consent agenda?
Okay, if you have additional items, certainly.
Yes, I'd like to put 24.
I'm sorry, sir, you're breaking up and I can't.
I'd like to put 24 on the consent agenda.
Well,
And also I understand that me and Mr. Hassan have had a conversation, so.
Mayor Pro Tem.
yeah,
Mayor Pro Tem, it says you're muted, but you're talking. I don't know if you can unmute your device. Okay, let's try that.
Can you hear me now?
Much better, I think.
much better. Yeah, okay, can you start from the beginning, sir?
Yeah, I want to add 24 to the consent agenda and understand Mr. Hassan and the mayor had a conversation about the Blue Ribbon Committee, and Mr. Hassan wants to delete that from the agenda on number 20.
Okay,
All right, so we're deleting 20 and adding 24 to the consent agenda.
Right,
now
Commissioner
we're
from the
adding
eighth.
number 20 as a deletion. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add item 25 to the consent agenda.
it's been added.
I thought
It was,
Yeah.
it was recommended for addition.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay. Commissioner from the second.
Yes, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, all right. All right, very well.
All right,
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
All right, that was the commissioner from the seventh and the first.
the 7th and the 1st to approve the consent agenda, right, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr.
Can we get
Clark,
a review from the clerk?
yeah, okay. All right, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
okay. Consent agenda consists of items 1 through 19 with the addition of item number 20 as a deletion, add item number 24 and item number 25
And the addendum agenda.
and the addendum, I'm sorry. The addition for the Augusta Airport and Augusta University and the revisions to item number 12.
Are we straight?
Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan, Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes.
That motion carries with Mr. Hassan out.
All right, Madam Clerk, we're gonna go in this order. We're gonna take item 21 and item 23.
Item 21 is
Yes.
an update from the Commission's appointed homeless task force, Commissioner Jordan Johnson.
Commissioner from the first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to my colleagues. I want to just first off start by thanking everyone for for their support on the homeless task force. We have been in the process of gauging providers throughout the community who are service providers for the homeless, whether that means shelters, whether that means resources. We have gauged those individuals and plan to bring them to the table for an initial meeting this month. And as that panel gets put together, we'll make sure to send out an email letting the commission know who those members are, also so the general public will know. In regards to the item that we're talking about right now, the working group that came together decided that, when we had our last couple of days of inclement weather, Augusta got down into the 30s overnight, into the low 30s, and we thought that it was necessary to have warming centers open across the county so that folks could have a safe place to go, someplace that was warm, away from the cold, away from the rain. I believe we had a flood warning out of those 5 nights as well. And so, excuse me, out of that working group, we had some folks who really did some outstanding work, some amazing work to get this warming center open. As a result of the work, May Park was open for 5 nights from 6 p.m. until 10 a.m. And that working group that helped put this together was EMA, Housing and Community Development, the Sheriff's Office, Parks and Rec staff. Some are in the chambers today, our CERT volunteers, the fire department, and public transit. And the goal of that whole working session, again, was to figure out how, and I apologize to city attorney and our administrator's office. The goal of that working group was to identify how to open up a warming center to again, make sure that folks had a safe place to go. And throughout those days of work with 10 Parks and Rec staff working. And the good thing about this whole item was that we were able to service over 40 people throughout those nights. I know there was conversation about whether or not the service was needed. Well, that showed that over 40 people were served, including children. We had families in the warming center at night, so that was amazing. Each family was given a cot, a blanket, and some snacks, and all of the excess items that were not used were donated to the Marion Barnes Center. So I wanted to take this opportunity to not only just give you an update, Commissioner Williams and I give you an update on the warming center, the happenings over at May Park, but I wanted to take the opportunity to publicly thank the working group who had a hand in making sure that this was successful. Again, EMA, Housing Community Development, our Sheriff's Department, Parks and Rec, CERT volunteers, the fire department, and public transit, making sure that this was a successful endeavor. And again, it was a great first step to show exactly what can be done when we come together and just, strategize to serve our homeless, to serve folks who need the help the most. And so again, I want to take this opportunity to give my appreciation. I think I can speak for Commissioner Williams as well, for those who had a hand in making this successful, including every member on the commission. So thank you again for believing in that we have some work to do with the homeless is concerned. Again, this is a good first step towards solving a problem that has been around longer than any of us. But we want to make sure that that this working group has been extremely serious about providing some results where solving this issue is concerned. So again, we are in the process of continuing to identify those service providers. And once those service providers are identified and have responded accordingly to invitations to serve on the task force, we'll announce those names and a meeting date. But germane to this item, thank you for all who had a hand in making sure that this operation was successful. And I look forward to working closely with everyone in the near future. And Mr. Mayor, if I could yield some time over to Commissioner Williams to address the item if he has anything additional to say.
All right, Commissioner from the 7th. I'm sorry, Commissioner from the 2nd, then I'm going to go to the 7th. Commissioner from the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My hat's off to everyone that helped out with our task force regarding our short-term goal. We broke the task. We broke our task up to a short-term goals and long-term goals. And when we meet later on this month, we'll be addressing the long-term goals for addressing the homeless problem in our community, making the decision if there's additional beds that needs to be available in the community, and just address some of the issues or problems that the homeless may have that we could help them get over. So basically, that's what it would be. So after our next meeting later on this month, we'll have more of a detail and an outline of where we want to go with this action. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for the chairs of this committee. I was wondering, the Continuum of Care organization that is the homeless advisory organization mandated by HUD and also receive funding. Do you have any plans to bring them into the conversation, or are they working with you yet, or kind of where does that stand in relation to what y'all are trying to accomplish, I guess?
We're going to bring some organizations in with us with our next meeting this month and outline the plan and the objectives. Once we get the plan outlined and get our objectives clear, we'll bring in some more of our community neighbors and have them work with us on the task force. And right now, it's only a small group of people till we get the picture painted.
Gotcha, and that's good to hear, because I think that organization, I mean, they've been doing it for a long time. And I mean, the Salvation Army right now is looking to build a new shelter at the Pullman Hall, and you know, they have resources and things that can really enhance and help us. So I definitely would hope that we would bring that organization into the picture, you know, from their experience standpoint of dealing with the homeless in Augusta. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you as well. All right, again, thank you for the update. Madam Clerk, we'll receive this as information. Item number 23.
Item 23 is Ms. Joy Barr presenting entrepreneur skills training and broadband project requested by Commissioner Brandon Garrett.
Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad to present Joy Barr. She is here from the clubhouse to talk about some ongoing projects that will be very beneficial to our community as a whole. There's a lot of opportunities here, and I think she has a brief presentation for us. So I'm just going to turn it over to Joy.
Fantastic. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. For those of you that aren't, first let me say thank you for all that you all do. I know that a vast majority of you have full-time jobs and families and other obligations in our community. I've lived here my whole life and absolutely love my city and truly appreciate the work that each of you do to support the city. The clubhouse, we're entering our 10th year as an organization serving in Augusta. For those of you that aren't as familiar, we have a few different missions here at the clubhouse. We offer training that includes entry-level development, full stack development. It's a 12-week training program. We're also a co-working space, which means that small businesses, before they have the need or the capital to move into their own location, can rent various options here. They can share desks all the way up to renting their own office suite, but it gives them a professional presentation for a new business startup by way of address, receptionist, printers, those sorts of things. And then we're also a maker space. So we've got access to 3D printers and a laser printer. So when you think anything innovation or entrepreneurial related, that would fall into the clubhouse. What we have up on the screen right now is a history of some of our larger grants, and I won't go through all of these, but I share them hopefully just to confirm the work that we've done previously and build your confidence about what we're going to do with our latest grant coming up this year. So we can move to slide 2. Thank you. So the 2 things that I want to talk to you specifically about today, and where Commissioner Garrett and I had spoken and he asked me to come share, are one is a program and one is a project. The program is the Make Startups Entrepreneurial Skills Training, and it is a 12-week instructional training program with 6 months of mentorship, specifically for new small business owners, new entrepreneurs, or those that have yet to launch their business. They have an idea and they want to move into that small business space, with a highlight around disadvantaged entrepreneurs. And then also bridging the digital divide. And I know that several of you are on the Metro Chamber Digital Divide Committee and work on this in different ways. Connectivity is obviously a huge problem to solve, but also an enormous opportunity. And these kind of go hand in hand for what we're going to be talking about today. So the core challenges with entrepreneurs, specific to disadvantaged entrepreneurs, is the gap between affording and finding training. Oftentimes we find that disadvantage spans it touches a lot of areas in someone's life, and so entrepreneurs, are included in that, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to launch a business if you don't have access to internet where you are currently. Investment capital is it's not meant to absorb the training cost associated with an industry agnostic training program. And what I mean by that is every industry has training opportunities. If you want to learn to be a realtor, you go and get trained in that. If you want to be a doctor, an attorney, a welder, there are all of those training opportunities. But entrepreneurs you can be an entrepreneur in any vertical. And so having training that is available to the specific functions around creating and managing a small business is what this training program is. And so without high quality training, entrepreneurs don't qualify for investment capital. And then entrepreneurial support organizations like the Clubhouse, and there are others around the state and the nation, struggle to sustain themselves and offer these services. Here at the Clubhouse, we're very conscientious about not applying for grants in a competitive space with help need services. So we work real diligently to not compete with the Salvation Army or the Boys and Girls Club for those critical, top tier human needs concerns. And so that eliminates a lot of opportunities for us to seek funding. We feel like we have figured out a good system for that, and want to be able to share that with other organizations around the state. Next slide, please. So our solution, as I talked about, is creating this training program that centers around the nuts and bolts, if you will, for a small business. Payroll, the legal components to owning a small business, marketing, human resources, federal guidelines, giving folks that have a great idea or a product the tools and the backing, those technical skills that they need to launch and then sustain a successful business. And I've got some information on here, and all of this will be shared with y'all, but it gives you the parameters for what qualifies. The term disadvantaged is a term associated with the funding that we're going to talk about in a bit, but each county has slightly different parameters for that, and then how we will measure success here in the program. Next slide, please. So how does the training get funded? The Department of Labor, as you can see, manages an enormous amount of money, $9.4 billion in discretionary training funds. And we have all heard of them as workforce development funds. And so inside of here locally, the Regional Commission is what covers Richmond County, and then Workforce East Central Georgia covers other counties that are included in the CSRA. And they manage WIOA funds, and that's those Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funds. And it is, think of it as a bucket of money to train those disadvantaged individuals in our community to either a first introduction into training or a retooling of skills that support open positions in our community. So those organizations work in tandem with industry and community needs. For example, cyber. So we all know that, we hear a lot of information about how we don't have the current workforce that we need to equip the open positions available to cyber. So the Regional Commission and East Central Georgia have connections to potential employees that either lack the skills, un or underemployed, and they work to bridge that gap, to connect all those pieces so that we have the people that we need with the skills that they need as a community, and that the members of our community have the skills that they need to be gainfully employed and take care of themselves. So this legislation has always allowed for entrepreneurial skills training, but up until now, we've lacked the accreditation system to access this opportunity. So the federal legislation has, nothing needs to happen on a legislative matter to the approval is already there for this. We've just lacked that essential accreditation system. And with our most recent grant award, which is through the lieutenant governor created right before COVID happened, a committee that is the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation. And they started seeking funding for that. And I believe that they had amassed $1 million. They opened up a grant opportunity. We applied along with multiple other organizations around the state and were awarded the first, and I believe the only grant thus far from that organization. It's $250,000. And that grant is what we are using to launch this program and 4 other light programs around the state. So Make Startups is the name of the program. So the Make Startups Certificate of Entrepreneurship is the bridge between these federal funds that already existed, but just weren't being utilized towards entrepreneurship. To folks in our community, that true American spirit of entrepreneurship and fantastic ideas that we know exist in our community, most especially to those who are disadvantaged and have historically lacked the opportunity to go from those great ideas and the the ability to create a small business, but not having access to the process or the funds to do so. Next slide, please. So our next step, applications are now currently open for entrepreneurs or hopeful entrepreneurs to apply for the program, and they'll be open through the end of this month. So it's almost still a full month, with our first cohort beginning classes on Tuesday, April 27th. Some of our other next steps. So if you think about the program having two main components, one is training the actual entrepreneurs, taking them through the process so that they acquire all the skills and resources and networking that they need to be successful. And then the accreditation validates that training and will open up capital to them. So currently, without a personal relationship with a commercial banker, it's very difficult for an individual to access small business capital. And so this accreditation process will help to verify and acknowledge the training that individuals have had and their readiness to manage capital for their business. Like I briefly shared about earlier, we are launching, so the Clubhouse is the first pilot of this program, and there will be 4 others in cities around the state. We are quite excited about being able to launch this, from our home city here and have the connections and the opportunity to shine, if you will, not necessarily as an organization, but as a city. And so that our goal for each site is to train 50 entrepreneurs. It'll be 25 individuals per cohort. And then of course, around the state, that'll give us 250 statewide. And then from there, establish a national training and accreditation program, that will always be centered here. Next slide, please. So that is the program. This is the project, Bridging the Digital Divide. So there are several wonderful organizations, like I spoke about earlier. The Chamber of Commerce has a Digital Divide Task Force. That the Cyber Center here with Eric Toller and his team, I know that they're working on this. And this is just where we are in this equation. We all recognize the huge disparities between folks who have adequate access to the internet. COVID amplified that times a million. We see it most especially with our students and with our seniors, not just with school, but seeking healthcare and mental health care, connecting to all the resources that we need. And so in those places in our community that either have no access or inadequate access, there are plenty of pockets where there's access, but it's not affordable. And then we also have the hurdle of there might be access and it's not affordability, but there's the component of adoption, people having more mental barriers, not recognizing the value or fears around the internet. And so those are kind of the 3 biggest hurdles to getting connected. So we were connected to an organization that has a pilot with the Michigan school system, and then also in Dallas, Texas. They reached out to EOA and they connected us to the Clubhouse about 8 or 10 months ago. And we've been working with them. So they've got these 2 pilot areas. We applied for a grant here with them and are just waiting to hear on that grant. And a significant portion of that grant is for us to fund a regional director of digital inclusion. One of the hurdles is that it is such a difficult problem to solve that without someone really championing that full time, it makes it difficult to continue to move that ball. Their concept is a municipality-led, similar to a co-op, and will eventually be revenue positive. And so obviously the sort of infrastructure supports education, small business growth, healthcare, and just our overall community connectivity. Next slide. And thank y'all for hanging with me. This is the last one. How you can help. The biggest component or the biggest way that you can help, honestly, is by sharing the opportunity for budding entrepreneurs in your district. Once they apply to our program, we'll help them walk through the WIOA funding process. And if they fall into that disadvantaged category, all of the training is covered through these Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funds. And so the program is open to any entrepreneurs that want to, gain the skills through the program. Anyone can self-pay, but we anticipate a majority of the applicants, or probably 50-50, will qualify for the training to be covered. Also, to other ways you can help, think about and utilize the clubhouse as your subject matter expert in all things connected to innovation and entrepreneurship. Eric Parker and Grace Belangia are both founders here, both still, deeply connected to the organization and work here full time and have vast resources. I know that several of you are connected to them, and reach out. And I want to encourage all the commissioners to reach out to me. I can connect you to them, but use us in the same way that you would economic development or Augusta and Company. And so one of the other things that I want to highlight is the opportunity to offer to some of these graduate businesses the opportunity for the city to be a first customer. So as you go through a bid process and you issue an RFP, would like to explore the opportunity to have a set aside or highlight the opportunity for small businesses and especially disadvantaged new businesses, to apply for those and help get them off the ground, kind of overcoming some of those first initial hurdles. And then for those of you that, have any connections or resources to other policymakers to help us move this process along in our area and across. And I believe that is my last slide. Is that right?
All right, Ms. Barr, thank you for your presentation. And are there any questions? Commissioner from the 8th. Commissioner from the 8th, you're muted.
That whole technology thing, Mayor. Us diaper dandies hadn't quite fully got the grasp of it. Joy, I appreciate you so much for presenting today. And these are some really good opportunities. I'm most excited really about the broadband project, and I really hope that that becomes a fruition here, just because we've come to see the areas that are really underserved in our area. We've heard from constituents that have come in and talked to us about their inaccessibility to having internet access. You mentioned a letter of support. Is there a specific request for one right now, or is this just a general letter of support?
Yes, thank you for that. So in my how you can help, we do currently, so as I mentioned earlier, when we apply for grant funding, we're very mindful to not be competitive with those health services. And so an organization called the Kauffman Foundation has an open grant. So an example of how the commission could support us through a letter of support. We can apply for a grant and use it's $15,000 and use those funds to pay our instructors for the entrepreneur training program. But we have to work in conjunction with the municipality for that. So if the city of Augusta can issue a letter of support for this specific program, then that opens up funding opportunities. So not seeking funding from the city, but your support and partnership in a more formalized way allows us to seek funding in other places. And so we do have that current opportunity now for that $15,000. And so either departments inside of the city or we have, we work with HCD, and I know that they can't offer letters of support without commission approval. So that's kind of an example of, I'm not sure if y'all offer letters in a more general way or if they are always tied to a specific ask, and I can understand where you would want them to be tied to a specific ask.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think that us as a commission, I think this is definitely something that we would look into supporting, especially as it reaches the gap that's out there in regards to digital access. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barr.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, all right, we've got just a few more items on our agenda at this time. And
thank you, Joy, for joining us.
Thank y'all very much.
all right, thank y'all. Madam Clerk, we've got just a few more items that are left for us. It has been brought to my attention that there was a meeting that the judicial working group met with Burke County. And so there's some information that I think they'd like to share with us that will probably best be fit under other business when we get to that point. But again, we've got just a few more items that are before us at this point. Let's go to item number 26 and 27.
Item 26 is to discuss commissioner resuming to chamber in person. Requested by Commissioner Catherine McKnight.
All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from third.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bringing this back maybe one day earlier than when we had talked about it 30 days ago. We had discussed the fact that maybe we were going to try to get back into the chambers in person. Mr. Donald presented to us that we would come back, discuss it, and so I'm bringing it today. And what I was going to do is make a motion to resume meeting in person April 13th, week after Masters.
I second that motion.
Mayor.
Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I made the motion for 30 days, I'd like to hear from the administrator. As far as the 30 days, I think is next week, but I'd like to hear kind of where he's at on this for me, please.
All right, agreed. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Substitute motion, May 1. Substitute motion, May 1.
All right, you're muted again, Mayor Pro Tem. But let's do this. Let's just hold that. Let's hear from the administrator, and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Commission. I think Commissioner Fransom is correct. We're on track to present those findings for at the next committee meeting or the next meeting of the commission. The current status is While there hasn't been a date for recommendation, I think we do have to have a plan to re-enter safely. One of the biggest obstacles, which I had an opportunity to speak, to have a candid conversation with Commissioner McKnight earlier today, is that if you were to place all of our staff and commission in the same chambers without certain precautions, then let's say one person was to come up positive, you basically take out your whole commission and staff at one time. And so I think there's some things that we can do to alleviate those challenges. We're working on those things now, and we'll have them prepared for next week. I think she made a good point that there are other entities, including the Georgia Senate, that are meeting regularly, but also, as I expressed to Commissioner McKnight, they actually test. I verified today by calling the General Assembly on Mondays and Thursdays, and then they have a protocol for if someone comes up positive, how you actually coordinate that, how long they're out. I think they do a mandatory 7 days and 3 consecutive negative tests. And so we're establishing those same draft protocols as well as the process for re-entering into the chambers, and we're on schedule to have those for you next week. And Commissioner Frantum, I think I answered your question because you just wanted a status update from what I understood of where we are for next week and where we are right now.
Yeah, and I appreciate your follow-up. I guess I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit. Like the Mayor Pro Tem's about to say May 1st. Are you feeling confident about May 1st? Or are you kind of,
I would tell you, I'm more confident about May 1st than I am April 13th. I think I'll then have to inquire with procurement and some others to make sure we can get that space ready by then, but definitely more confident about May 1st than I am April 13th.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Again, I'm going to go to the Mayor Pro Tem, but let me say this, that unequivocally, as we're giving considerations to returning to the chamber, we're going to have not only safety measures in place, as the administrator indicated, you got to have equipment in place. And so that means that we will utilize emergency procurement procedures to do that. This will not be something that we stand idle to buy on, but we will exercise emergency procurement procedures in order to get that done while there's an interest in returning to the chamber. This is a still ever growing pandemic. We're excited that vaccinations are available to include the third vaccination or vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson, which is a single dose. Hopefully it'll be arriving in the state of Georgia soon. But even with that, we've got new strains of the virus, and we have to make sure that we provide for the health and welfare and safety of all of our citizens. But without question, those individuals who are employees in this local government, and that includes those of you as elected officials as well, and those things have to be in place before we get back into that chamber. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
We can now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Like Commissioner McKnight, I was thinking April 13th. In fact, I polled a couple of people to see which way they wanted to go, but it's been pretty much indicated to me that the administrator needs a little bit more time. So that's why I made the substitute motion of May 1.
All right, Commissioner from the third.
So with that motion, that substitute motion being for May 1, does that mean that that is the day we're going to be back in the chambers personally?
It fails because it didn't get a proper second.
Right.
Commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for the administrator before I either make a second or support the original motion.
Continue.
Thank you, Mayor. Administrator, you mentioned that the state is meeting and, the representatives up there are testing twice a week. Are they also allowing the public inside during their meetings, or are they still excluding the public?
They're excluding, they're actually having, they're allowing them to do the one-on-one meetings at the discretion and within the safety measures of the individual elected official, but they're not allowed on the floor and things of that nature like they normally would be.
So in regards to local municipalities, is that something that we could look at as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So you have the authority to develop how you coordinate that. And I think my recommendation is likely going to include kind of staggering how you do your staff so that everyone's not in there at the same time. And then secondly, limiting the access to the public to those who might be presenting and things of that nature. But yes, you could kind of mirror, and my recommendation is going to align very closely with those successful procedures that they've had.
And in regards to these emergency procurement that the mayor stated that we're going to need, what sort of items are we going to need? I mean, we've known that we're going to have to be preparing to meet in person for quite some time. I know that the plexiglass is already in place, as well as other measures. What else is needed?
Yes, I mean, some of those things won't be under emergency. So the temperature checks and all of that stuff, we've already kind of put those on order. But the actual size of the chambers does not necessarily fit the public. So based on what the commission approves, because we don't know which direction you're going to go in just yet, if you allow the public in, then we'll likely have to procure other materials to kind of reconfigure the chambers. If it's only going to be staff and elected officials, then we could likely just stagger our staff and have you guys safe behind the plexiglass, and then we reconfigure where our staff would be sitting and responding to you.
So do the motions need to be restated to state about the intentions of the commission with the public?
So I again defer to the will of the commission. My recommendation has not been presented yet because my assessment is not complete. So any decision that the commission offers today is fully up to the commission, and we'll observe and comply.
Might I suggest that we allow the administrator to complete his recommendation consistent with what the commissioner from the 7th requested, 2 weeks ago. And it's on the docket to be presented on next week, at which point in time you'll have an opportunity for a more thoughtful conversation because you'll have the data and associated background to support whatever decision you make.
I'll second May 1st.
Commissioner from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for our administrator, maybe for yourself as well. How often are we receiving updates about COVID numbers, cases in Richmond County? How often do we receive those updates?
Yeah, so we're monitoring those on a daily basis. I've been trying to get those in the middle of the 2nd and 3rd week, because that's when they're kind of verified or whatnot. And so you've received those on a regular basis, except when we have a closure or something of that nature internally, I just send those as they come.
Okay. Yeah, I would thank you, Administrator Donner. I would agree with the mayor. I think we ought to allow you to finish your assessment and come back to us before we make a decision on the date to go back to the chambers. It's important that we take this pandemic seriously. I'm in favor of returning back to the chambers, but I want to make sure that we do it in a safe way. While I think May 1st is a good date to chart towards, I would hate for us to move prematurely without hearing recommendations from your office, and also getting us in a position where we're going to have to ping pong back to virtual. So, that's my opinion. I think we ought to wait for your recommendation. But with that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for record.
Thank you. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, sir. My question is a procedural issue. You had declared the May 1st, the motion by the Mayor Pro Tem had failed for lack of a second. And then my colleague from the turned around and said, well, he was going to second it 15 minutes later after it had been declared failure. failed. So my question is, that is, in my view, that's an invalid second. I'm expounding on the procedure here. So I don't see that as a valid second to a failed motion.
Okay, so can I second it again? I mean, can I do it again, Mr. Mayor? If he doesn't see that as valid?
I'm gonna toss it over to the attorney. I think that the commissioner from the 4th raises a very valid concern. Chair recognizes Attorney Brown. Attorney Brown. He's sitting there.
Oh, okay.
And again, to my colleagues, the reason I raised that issue is we can have a failed motion, then 20 minutes later, somebody come out and say, well, I second that. So that's
well, that's fine.
I understand.
That's fine. So if I could make it again, that's fine. If not, we'll live with August 3rd. I mean, April 13th or what have you. But Mr. Brown has the floor.
Chair recognizes Attorney Brown for a ruling. Attorney Brown.
Do you know what he ruling on?
No, I did not.
Come on now.
No, I was working on that kind of hot button issue that the administrator just announced, that these meetings can be had physically in the chambers and to exclude the public. That certainly bears a need for research, in that the state legislature is not bound by all the sunshine laws that local governments are. So I was just assigning that to one of the senior attorneys to jump right on that. So I did not hear your latter discussion.
And Mr.
All right, the commissioner from the 4th, he'll restate his concern. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, sir. I hear the administrator trying to jump in, but I move for Attorney Brown.
Yes, sir.
There had been a regular motion made by a commission from the 3rd. The mayor pro tem from the 5th made a substitute motion. And after a period of time, the mayor declared that motion failed for lack of a second. And then another period of time passed. And then the commission from the 8th said, well, he gonna go back and second that motion, the substitute motion that failed due to lack of a second. My question is, I'm concerned that if we could just anytime go back and say a motion that didn't get a second, you can throw one up 30 minutes later. Say, I second that motion. It's my belief and understanding that once it was declared failed by the chair, then that was the end of that unless another motion was made. Thank you.
Actually, that's an easy call. That is correct. The motion failed to get a second, it died. It cannot be resurrected by a second at that time. When a motion is made, there is to be no further discussion until there's a second. If there is no second, the chair is supposed to announce that the motion dies. The problem we have sometimes is that a motion is made, we allow discussion, and then second the motion. You have to motion, get a second before any discussion occurs. In this case, discussion occurred, but the problem we have here is that the motion had been declared dead by the chair.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
All right. So, Mayor.
Chair recognizes the Mayor Pro Tem.
Just go back to Ms. McKnight. I mean, unless she just wants to rely on the report next week or what have you, that's fine. I'm good. But, what I really do believe is that we'll probably end up with waiting on the report. We'll probably end up back in the chamber sometime in May. But I'm good.
I appreciate that, and I'm going to get back to that here in just a second. I want to give the administrator an opportunity to clarify some statements that were made just a moment ago, and then we're going to come back to this main matter, and we'll dispose of it.
Yeah, I think for if Mr. Brown is doing that research, the assumption is not that the public would not be allowed to attend and participate in meetings. It would be that they would not be in the chamber. So right now, we are abiding by those sunshine laws, having given the public access as we are doing this virtual piece. What a recommendation could be, and again, we're still assessing it, is that while you may be in person, or some of you may be in person, the public might be accessing it through that hybrid channel, similar to what we're doing right now. I think Commissioner Garrett alluded to that. So it would not be excluding the public from participating in the meetings. That would by no means be a part of any recommendation that we would bring forth. So wanted to give that clarity to legal.
Chair, now Attorney Brown.
The only reason I want to try to get this clear so we don't have a barrage of newspaper articles tomorrow stating that the commission is going to be physically in session and attempt to physically exclude the public, which beforehand is either not allowable or questionable.
Yeah.
I do hear what the administrator is saying, because I know he was kind of put on the spot because he hadn't finished his assessment. So he has not really made any recommendations at this point. However, I do think there's arrangements to have the spacing that's needed, which will limit the public access to the chambers without a full exclusion. The problem you will have is, and maybe IT will help with this, is if the meeting is to be a physical in-person meeting and you attempt at the same time to zoom it out so that the public can see everything as it has a right to do, you usually have so much technology interference. Is the reason we didn't do that earlier. But all those things can be worked out, and administrators certainly seem to have a handle, on the different aspects that you're asking about. But I know Augusta is not intending to exclude the public if the meeting is deemed a physical meeting.
Absolutely.
Right, I'm going to go back to what we said earlier. The administrator is still in the discovery and investigation phase for his final review. It is prudent for us to allow that to take place. And as he indicated earlier, he will be prepared to make those recommendations and present on next week. I would urge the commissioner from the 3rd and those that are interested in seconding a motion, I would urge that any and all motions at this point be withdrawn, and we wait until next week, get the recommendations, and you've got a clean slate upon which to paint on your canvas about when and a date certain of when to come back into the commission chamber.
Mr. Mayor, so we're gonna not vote on it now? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I'd recommend. But
Well,
you've got a motion. I'd urge you to just withdraw your motion. And you've got opportunity to make a motion on next week.
or restate, maybe restate this and vote on it, go ahead and vote. Am I able to do that?
I'm gonna leave that up to each and every one of you all to determine, but I think again, you don't have a full recommendation. We're just having a variety of conversations about what could and should happen, but with no supporting data to back it up.
All right, so we can come back next week with Mr. Donald's recommendations and discuss it then, and then make a motion to vote.
That's what I would recommend.
Commissioner from the 3rd, you have a valid motion and a second. The mayor that recommended you to withdraw it. If you don't want to withdraw it, you don't have to. Let's just keep it simple.
Let's
I think that's not part of the procedure.
Let's go ahead and vote, please.
Madam Clerk, the motion before us is voting to return April the 13th. Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Frenham,
No, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Son, Mr. Johnson,
No, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
No, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Same.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
No, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
No.
That motion fails. with Mr. Clark, Mr. Garrett, and Ms. McKnight voting yes. Voting no, Mr. Franum, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Scott, Commissioner Bobby Williams, Commissioner Sias abstaining.
Okay.
Item number 27.
Item 27, the Richmond County Board of Assessors requests the ratification of the contractual agreement with Mr. Scott Roundtree, who was selected by the board as the new chief appraiser for the property appraisal office during a call meeting held on Friday, February 29th, 2021.
Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, sir. I don't have an objection to this contract. Simple, I just want to ensure that the Board of Assessors understand what I consider some valid points within this contract. And if our attorney has reviewed that contract, I will appreciate it if he would let me know that if I'm right or wrong on this. So I have a couple of points to make, Mayor. And one of them is concerning page 3, section 6. And the second paragraph of section 6. It says that in addition, for years 2 and 3 of this agreement, the board agrees to increase said base salary and or other benefits of Roundtree in such amounts and to such extent as recommended by the Board of Assessors with funding approved by the Augusta, Georgia Commission, but not in excess of such rate as granted general employees of Augusta, and not to exceed 5%. What I understand that to mean is that they can't give the chief tax assessor any larger raise than was granted to the employees of Augusta as a whole. And then it says the annual base salary provided above shall be adjusted as necessary to include any cost of living adjustments, i.e. COLA, or merit raises that may be given or awarded to Roundtree from time to time. So that means he's eligible for COLA, and I don't have a problem with that because the COLA is given to all employees. So I just want to make sure in my untechnical view that restricts the raise to what the rest of the employees are the percentage. Second thing I want to bring our attention to is voluntary resignation in this contract, which is on page 2, section 4, item C. It says, in the event Roundtree voluntarily resigns his position with the board before expiration of the aforesaid terms of his employment, then Roundtree shall give board 90 days advance notice unless the parties otherwise agree. And this is a voluntary resignation. If such notice is properly given, Roundtree shall be entitled to receive severance, if eligible, as provided in the Augusta, Georgia Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual for SES employees. As we all know, there is no longer a severance pay for voluntary resignation for SES employees. So in accordance with that, he will be ineligible, Mr. Roundtree will be ineligible for a severance pay if he voluntarily resigns. And I just want to bring those items out so we don't have to argue and fight about that later. And if I'm wrong in that, I appreciate if the attorney will correct me, Mayor, and I will request that.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Attorney Brown.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Commissioner Sias, as to the first section that you referenced, which I believe was section 6, paragraph 2. I believe that paragraph is problematic. It is ripe for dispute and litigation. My interpretation of the first part that you read regarding the first sentence that referenced the 5%, I agree with your interpretation of that, but that is so poorly stated until I believe that will cause legal problems for this government as well as the Board of Commissioners. I believe that paragraph needs to be restated so as it to be clear. especially given the history that we have for this position and this contract. The second part, when you refer to the COLAs, I believe that statement could be reasonably disputed, but I think the more proper interpretation of it is different from what you state. The way that is written, the Board of Tax Assessors could give him a COLA or give him merit pay. It does not restrict it to the COLA or tie it to the COLAs that Augusta, Georgia Commission authorized. I believe that statement also need to be rewritten. As to 4C, I agree with you in which you pointed out that his resignation and any benefits he get for resignation is tied to the PPPM and other employment policies of Augusta. And therefore, the result would be, as the PPPM and the policies are written right now, if he voluntarily leaves, he does not get a severance. So with that, I do agree. But I do believe paragraph 6 is significantly flawed, and that I will recommend that you not sign this contract with the way that it is written.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Can I just make a motion to simply send this back and make the clarifications and or make it clear about the separation pay and bring this back next week? Can I just
Second.
Second.
Ooh, can you clarify that, Mr. Mayor? Who we're going to record?
Ms. Scott, she seconded the motion. Ms. Scott seconded the motion.
Thank you. To refer to next week special call meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Ernie Brown.
For clarification, does that review also include what First Thing Commissioner Sias asked about, which is also section 6 and 4?
That review includes getting this contract in the proper form so that you can represent it to the commission for adoption, whatever that means.
All right, thank you.
Voting.
Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark? He's out.
He's out.
Mr. Franum?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Son is out. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Clark and Mr. Son out.
Madam Clerk, we're going to go to item number 22, and then any new or other business that might come up. All right.
Item number 28, you said?
22.
Okay. My page is gone. Item 22, review and evaluate claims against Gold Cross contained and attached email. Commissioner Sias.
Thank you, sir. Recently, we all received an email from an anonymous person expressing some serious concerns about the performance and issues going on with the Gold Cross EMS services that we contract with or have an MOU with to provide EMS services for the city of Augusta and our 200,000 residents plus anytime another 150,000 visitors on a daily basis. I'm very much concerned about that, but as it's clear, it's an anonymous letter. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time saying everything in this email is correct. But however, I think that email is a good wake-up call for us that we do need to get a little bit more intimate with our service provider for EMS and ensure that we have some accountability in our MOU, which we do not presently have at time. No response time, no other issues, anything like that, no inspections. So the bottom line is, I think this is much wake-up call for the commission to actually review and look at what it's doing. With it providing this emergency service is absolutely required and we have to have it. And right now we've taken our own ambulances out of service. So I just think we need to be really aware when you put all your eggs in one basket. And then in this case, the basket doesn't belong to us. So we got all our eggs in somebody's basket that belongs to somebody else. Thank you. I'm done on that.
You still here, Mr. Mayor? I think the mayor stepped out. Mr. Donald, do you have some new items?
Yes, sir. There is one item.
If we could, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, are we going to take action on 22 or are we just going to receive it as information?
Receive it as information.
Without objection?
Yeah. Any objections? We're good, Mr. Bond.
Okay. I'm sorry. Are we item number 28 added on judicial working group report? Is that Mr. McDonald, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Donald?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so the Augusta Judicial Working Group that the mayor assigned, led by Mayor Pro Tem Williams, as well as additional commission members as a portion of this group, has had communication with Burke County, who has agreed and found necessary to issue a resolution to the Georgia General Assembly in advance of crossover to clarify areas within Senate Bill 9 so that there is not an adverse financial burden on the city of Augusta and Burke County as remaining partners within the circuit. And so Attorney Brown has created a draft resolution, and the partners at Burke County will be meeting tomorrow to ratify that same resolution. They've had an opportunity to contribute to it, although the draft was completed today. After a potential approval by the Augusta Commission, it would then go to the Burke Commission, where they would ratify it. We would put it in the hands of our delegation down at the General Assembly, as well as discuss it and ensure that those clarifications are placed in the bill so that there are no unintended consequences which result in increased financial obligation to the remaining circuit.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
And I believe, Madam Clerk, I believe we forwarded that that resolution. I don't know if you wanted to put it on screen or just distribute it as such, but it's very simple. If Mayor Pro Tem, if you wanted me to highlight those 4 key areas that we're asking for clarification on.
Okay.
Well, I forwarded it out to the commission. I will
Perfect.
Now.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's even better.
Okay, so Mr. Donald, go ahead and go with those 4 points for us.
Okay, well, it is the Superior Court justices are really the only areas for which there is very clear delineation within SB 9. So we are asking for clarity in the other 4 areas, which would include juvenile court. You know that we get a group grant that covers the entire circuit. So we're asking for clarifications on how those funds would be distributed, because it's not addressed at all in the bill and we don't want to carry those costs forward. Also, how the ensuring that the senior judge supplement remains the same, that no new judges who were not a part of the judicial circuit at the time of retirement are added, which would of course add cost to us. I think we're all prepared to carry the cost otherwise. Also, clarifications on the supplements that are allocated to those senior the judges that exist now within the circuit. Right now, the way that it is written in a very vague form, it looks as if they would have the Augusta circuit carry the Columbia County share, when we believe that the intent based on their own committee hearings is that the state would actually carry those costs. And so that type of clarifying language, even within the public defender's office and the DA's office, where again, we keep which we support, keeping the level of personnel the same, but again, the committee hearings actually allude to the state carrying those additional costs, but it is not clear at all within the bill. And so we support the intent, but without that being included in the bill, it dumps additional costs on the remaining circuit, which of course would be unfair and something we wouldn't support.
Got it. All right, is that Mr. Donald? Is that Mr. Donald?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is that Mr.
Yeah.
Garrett and Ms. McKnight
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
to approve this resolution?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
sign out, Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Hassan out.
Okay. Is there any more business, Ms. Bonner?
No, sir, that's it for me.
Mr. Donald, any more business?
I got one thing I want to say. I ain't the administrator, but I want to tell Miss Scott, I saw you.
Mr. Donald,
I
anything
believe
else?
we had one personnel item for which there may be a motion that is prepared.
Okay.
Is that going into, are we doing the item number?
Hang on a second. Mr. Garrett, Commissioner Garrett.
We're going in special session.
Session. Well, okay, that's item
Executive
number,
session.
Hang on a second, Mr. Garrett.
item.
Yes, I have the motion as Administrator Donald was speaking.
Going into executive session.
Got to go to executive session to do that, Mayor Pro Tem.
Hang on a second.
What?
Is that where we need to go, Mr. Brown?
Mr. Brown is muted. Mr. Brown, you're muted, sir.
Mr. Okay.
If I recall correctly, that's what the commission stated that it would do. It will go into executive session to discuss personnel on this week, is what the commission said last week.
Okay, is Jeff?
Well, I need a motion to go into executive
Okay.
session. Who was that, Ms. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Second.
Ms. Scott?
Right.
Okay. Motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel. Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
I guess, yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
No.
Mr. Son, Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
No.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Garrett and Ms. McKnight voting no, Mr. Son out.
Okay. Jeff, carry us to executive session.
Yes.
Okay.
So are we back out? Dennis, get off the phone. I see you.
I'm still here though.
Are we back on the floor?
Yes, sir.
Do we need a motion in the executive session, correct, Ms.
We
Bonner?
need a motion to approve the closed meeting affidavit.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Who was that second, Mr. Franum?
5 of us seconded.
Yes, ma'am.
Sean,
Okay, that's item number 29. Affidavit. Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Hassan out, Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Hassan and Mayor Davis out.
Commissioner Garrett, you have a motion?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Make a motion to accept the resignation of Environmental Services Director Mark Mehal, effective May 2nd, 2021, authorizing a severance of 45 days based on the severance agreement to be developed by the Augusta Law Department.
Second.
Second.
Was that
So
Mr.
we got a
Sias,
motion and a second.
That was a duet.
Mr. Garrett, and Mr. Sias? Okay,
Okay, voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan out, Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Hassan out. Mayor Davis.
Is there any other business, Ms. Bonner?
No, sir, that's it.
Y'all have a great day. Francine Scott, stop scratching your head. Y'all have a good day.
Take care.
You too.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Mr. Franum, can you give me a call? Is he gone?
He's left the meeting.